The NFL preseason kicks off with the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns tonight in the Hall of Fame game. Football is back, ladies and gentlemen. We're here today to not only dive into that game, but to also look at 5 Super Bowl contenders and pretenders heading into the new season. And even, we might even throw in some crossover grids at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. And if you like consistent, high-quality sports or fantasy football content, support us down below as we do it for absolutely free 4 times a week. We haven't missed a day in about 10-11 months. So please support us down below as we're on the road to 500 subs on the channel. As always, timestamps will be in the description of the video. And without further ado, this is the Untitled Podcast. It's Owen. Let's get into this game. Alright, as mentioned, even if it is preseason, football is back tonight in Canton. Couldn't be more excited, right? But there is still some key storylines here for tonight's game. For the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, their new quarterback, he's entering his 19th season with a new team, just like his mentor from Green Bay to the New York Jets. This team has high expectations this year. Some would say Super Bowl is in their future. We're going to dive into both of those teams later when we get to the Pretenders and Contenders. But Aaron Rodgers, he has some former targets with him in this offense, with Allen Lazard, with Randall Cobb. But he also has some fun and exciting new weapons in his arsenal, as he has Breece Hall coming back off of his knee injury. How will he look tonight? Garrett Wilson, a guy who's looking to take that second-year superstardom leap at the wide receiver position. So he has some old targets, some new targets, new situation, new head coach. How will this team look with a new quarterback? Even if Rodgers only plays a drive tonight, I'm not sure Rodgers will play. I don't think he's played preseason in the last couple years. But if he does play, it'll be very interesting to see how well this offense can gel in the first drive or so. For the Cleveland Browns, the biggest storyline tonight is Deshaun Watson, and this entire season relies on Deshaun Watson. As last year, he only played about 6 games. As we know, he had 800 days off of football, basically. And rightfully so, when he came back, he showed some rust. How will he look tonight? Will he look better? Will he look sharper? Is he going to shake off some of that rust? Again, even if it is just preseason. As a Browns fan, I'm hoping to see a little bit of something from Deshaun Watson tonight. Again, even if it's just preseason, because that $260 million of guaranteed money is a lot of money. And I want to see production with that money, right? Regardless, I think the Browns can get it done tonight with the home field advantage there in Canton. I'm expecting a big Jerome Ford game out of nowhere. He's just a player that is going to get a lot more opportunity this year for the Cleveland Browns, and I think I'd love to see him take that role, right? Show out like he did last year in preseason. Again, Browns are typically a good preseason team, and our delusion needs to start somewhere. So why not start it here with a win tonight against the New York Jets? But again, the Jets do travel well, so it is the Hall of Fame game. You know, maybe we're going to see more of a dynamic of fans in Canton than we originally thought. Browns, to me, are going to cover the spread. This game goes over the over-under total. The Browns, I'll say, win this about 20-13, 20-14 in a low-scoring preseason game 1. But that's going to do it for the Hall of Fame game. Let me know down below who you guys think is going to win this game. As Browns-Jets, it's just preseason again. But it's still football, right? As we're starting to get back into the swing of things. Moving over to the 5 Super Bowl contenders and pretenders. Not everyone is destined to win the Super Bowl here in the NFL, as we've seen with some franchises. But that doesn't stop each and every fan base and franchise from holding out a little bit of hope each and every year that it could be their year. Today I gathered the consensus top 10 Super Bowl favorites across all the major betting sites, and we're going to assign them as either a contender or pretender, excluding the Buffalo Bills, as I'm not set on if I think they're a contender or pretender yet. So some of these teams are ever-changing, and when I officially release my power rankings here in a couple weeks, some of these teams might be different. I might change my thought right before the year. Regardless, these are the top 10 consensus Super Bowl favorites, and we're going to look at who is really a contender, who is really a pretender. We're going to start here at the contention tier with the San Francisco 49ers. Arguably the most complete team in the league with the best head coach in the league in Kyle Shanahan. And you can argue that, if Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy, he was healthy in the NFC title game last year, this team goes on to eventually win the Super Bowl. Super talented offensively, defensively. We're talking about the 49ers. They just need that quarterback to take them over the top. And as mentioned, Brock Purdy, as Mr. Irrelevant last year, he took over in the middle of the year, in the middle of a win streak, and he caught fire. He ignited this team even more. And this team closed the regular season with like 11 or 10 or 11 straight wins. And they went out to, if it didn't come down to injuries, they were one of the top 4 teams in the league, right? The 49ers, I think they believe that they have a guy to get them over the top. They just need the guy to do it on a year in and year out basis. And that will be the question all year for San Francisco. Who will be or can be the guy for San Francisco going forward, whether if it's Brock Purdy, who caught fire last year, whether if it's Trey Lance, the 3rd overall pick from 2 years ago, or Sam Darnold, because reports have said Sam Darnold looks pretty dang good there in camp in San Fran. So it all comes down to if they can find the guy to get them, over the hump, basically. But right now it looks like Brock Purdy, and what we've seen of him, it's kind of hard to hate that pick, and it's kind of hard to say that San Fran's not a contender with Brock Purdy, even though he was Mr. Irrelevant just last season. Moving over to the Cleveland Browns as a pretender. Again, I was pleasantly surprised to see the Browns as a top 10 betting favorite to win the Super Bowl. But as a Browns fan, let's be serious. We are not a contender this season. We need to focus more so on Deshaun Watson and seeing if he can get back to where he was just a few years ago, aside from focusing on a Super Bowl this year. It doesn't matter if all the signs are pointing, or if all the signs are green and everything is in our favor and we sweep our division, we win 15 games this year. The Browns are going to be the Browns, and we're still going to find a way to mess it up. And again, we do have the talent on both sides of the ball, offensively, defensively, to be a contender year in and year out. But with the questions about Deshaun Watson and even the coaching staff, I'm not sold on Kevin Stefanski to be a high-level winning head coach. So those two alone, the quarterback and the head coach alone, make this an unattractive contender for me, and that's why they are a pretender for me. Again, as a Browns fan, though we might have the most loyal fan base in the NFL, we also have a tendency to be some of the most delusional fans here in the NFL. And that's why I always hope for the best, but prepare for the worst here for the Cleveland Browns. Moving over back to the contenders, we're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins. Miami, if you follow this channel at all, I'm a big believer this season with Vic Fangio as the new defensive coordinator and his infamous Fangio 6 scheme that took over the league last year. He's now in town as the new guy on the defensive side of the ball, and he's going to have Bradley Chubb and Jalen Ramsey as the captains to lead the charge on that side of the field. This should be a top 10 defense even in their stacked division, and we know that's not even the strength of this team. It's the offense. A top 5 receiver in Tyreek Hill paired with a rising superstar that's looking for another leap in Jalen Waddle. This offense has all the potential in the world, but then you pair that with maybe, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL, a borderline top 10 guy for me, in Tua Tagovailoa. Not to mention, you have an offensive mastermind behind all of that talent offensively in Mike McDaniel, second-year head coach, so there is some continuity there as well. I believe Miami wins their division, and I believe they make some noise in the playoffs, but again, this is more of a long shot than, let's say, a San Francisco for Miami to come out and win the Super Bowl. Moving over to the Baltimore Ravens, pretender. For years, the blueprint to beat this team has been the same. Force them to pass, make their offense one-dimensional, and when you can force them to pass, when you do, play physical man coverage, forcing Lamar Jackson to make tough throw after tough throw. But there's been a change there in Baltimore this offseason. With a new offensive coordinator in town as Todd Monken is taking over, we should see a different approach offensively, a more aggressive approach through the air. And it all starts, to me, with Lamar Jackson. Also with the additions of Zay Flowers, rookie wide receiver. Odell Beckham came over to the Ravens this offseason. This offense should succeed more this year through the air, especially with the already dominant Mark Andrews coming back. Defensively, this team did lose some pieces this offseason, but they're still a respectable group. They should still be in the top 15 range. However, when I look at this team, it just screams first-round exit. It's kind of like the Buffalo Bills the last couple years. And that's not to disrespect those teams or disrespect Lamar Jackson. I just don't believe that when it comes down to a one-game scenario, that they're better than 6 other AFC teams. And that's really what it comes down to. But moving over here to the 5 Super Bowl contenders, again, the Kansas City Chiefs. No shocker here. We have the reigning, defending Super Bowl champions in my best Paul Heyman impersonation. But again, this is a team that has the best quarterback and the best player in the league in Pat Mahomes. They have arguably the best head coach in the league in Andy Reid, as well as the best tight end in Travis Kelce. The biggest question with this team is their wide receiver core, and that's where a lot of people have their worries with Juju Smith and McCole Hardman both leaving this offseason to different ball clubs. But just a year ago, let's not forget this team lost one of the best wide receivers in the league in Tyreek Hill, as we just mentioned. That guy is a top 5 receiver in the league. The Chiefs lost him. People thought they would lose a step offensively. They would never be the same. Then they went on to win the whole thing. Then they went on to win the Super Bowl without him. And Pat Mahomes had a career year, right? This team is one of the best at replacing talent around the board in one way or another. And plus, if this team can recover from losing a top 5 receiver in Tyreek Hill, you're telling me they can't recover from losing Juju Smith and McCole Hardman? I think you'd be crazy to say that. This team has playmakers on both sides of the ball. Their young defense is going to surprise some people this year, I believe. However, history isn't on their side, as no team has repeated as Super Bowl champions since the Patriots in 2003 and 2004. But on the other hand, if there's any team to do it, I think there's a good chance it would be a team led by Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes. Regardless, they're a top 3 Super Bowl contender for me in 2023. Dallas Cowboys are going to be a top 3 pretender for me in the NFL rather. As just like the Browns, I shouldn't need a lot of explanation here for why the Dallas Cowboys are a pretender rather than a contender. On paper, America's team. This is a team that should be a Super Bowl contender each and every year, which is why they are betting favorite. They have one of the most complete rosters, but they haven't played in an NFC title game since 1995. In fact, they only have one playoff win since that point, and that is as much as my Cleveland Browns. They have been in this cycle where they have a lot of regular season success and sometimes some awards for their players, and when they do, when this team is winning a lot of games in those years, they usually have either a top 10 defense and offense or both, but they can just never put it together when it comes to the playoff time. I don't know if it's the pressure of being America's team, whatever the case may be, right? This team can just never put it together at the right time. So the moral of the story is they're going to find a way to mess it up. And you got to feel for the Dallas Cowboy fans, even though they are annoying. You got to feel for that when your team is winning 10 to 13 games a year, and then you can never win a playoff game. It's kind of like, you can't really get your hopes up. But welcome to being a Cleveland Browns fan, if I can talk. But on paper, this team is champions each and every year, just due to how complete their roster is. But on the field, I believe it's a first-round exit, or at best, a second-round exit. This team is not a conference title team, and again, pretender for me in 2023. Moving over to the Philadelphia Eagles, staying in the AFC East, but with a way better ball club. This is, the Super Bowl hangover is known to crush teams that lost in the years prior, but there's no reason to believe this Philadelphia Eagles team will, if that'll be the case for them in 2023, as they have the league's best O-line still. They have maybe the best wide receiver duo in the league in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. All of this, their offense is led by a MVP level quarterback, a top 5 level quarterback in Jalen Hurts, looking to take another step up, as we haven't seen his fullest potential yet. We haven't even talked about their defense yet. Their defense led the league in sacks last year. They had 70 sacks last year. That is absolutely insane. I would have to check, but I would assume that is the record for a team sack record. They also have one of the best cornerback duos. They're in James Bradbury and Darius Slay. This is the most complete team in the league, in my opinion. And again, they were one ticky-tack pass interference call away from winning the Super Bowl last year. There's no reason to believe this team won't be back at a high level. And unless Jalen Hurts takes a step back, they're definitely going to be a conference title team. So to me, Eagles, my top 2 Super Bowl contender. Moving over to the New York Jets. If you live in New York or you live by their media, for whatever reason, you think this would be a crazy take. The Jets haven't had a winning season since 2015, and they haven't made the playoffs since 2010. Now that they've traded for Aaron Rodgers, everyone thinks that that's going to change, right? Right? Now, while I do believe Aaron Rodgers will turn a page or two in New York and make them a formidable team once again, I just don't see them being a legitimate title contender this year. To me, again, just like the Cowboys and the Ravens, they're a first or second round exit at best. I can't see them being a conference title team. And I say that because, sure, they do have a lot of talents on both sides of the ball, right? A lot of talent on both sides of the ball. But their tackles offensively, they can't stay healthy. Mekhi Becton on the left side, we know he's a superstar in the making, but he's barely played the last 2 years. On the right side of the line, you have a 38-year-old Dwayne Brown, and those two guys are supposed to protect a 39-year-old Aaron Rodgers. So there's a lot of questions up front. But then we move to the backfield. Breece Hall, he's coming off of a knee injury that kept him out for the majority of last season. How is he going to look this year? Is he going to still have that same spark? As sometimes these knee injuries kill these running backs' careers early on. So there's questions in the backfield as well. And it's just too much to ask, to me, in my opinion, of a 40-year-old quarterback in Aaron Rodgers to go out there and if his O-line and his running backs aren't the greatest, to throw 50 to 60 times a game to carry this team and put them over the top. It's just too much to ask, and it's going to be too much wear and tear on this quarterback to, if they even make the playoffs with that scheme, is Aaron Rodgers going to be able to hold up? And that sounds disrespectful for a Hall of Fame quarterback, but is he going to be able to hold up? Is his body going to be able to hold up? Throwing 40, 50 times a game and kind of being the only reason that this team can win on a week-in and week-out basis. To me, if that happens, again, they're going to be a first or second round exit. I think this team's going to wear down if that is the case. And not to mention, they have an extremely tough division. Say what you want about the Patriots, but Bill Belichick is the greatest coach of all time, and he's going to make it hard on these New York Jets. And we already know about the Buffalo Bills, right, in that division, and the Miami Dolphins, which I think the Miami Dolphins will win that division. To me, if I had to choose between contender and pretender, I'm going to go with pretender just because of their division, because of their questions offensively, but their defense, at the end of the day, could also carry them to the contention tier. Regardless, my Super Bowl favorite this year, no doubt, I've said this since the end of last season, I said it since the conference title game last year, it is the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, things can change, but for me, this is my Super Bowl favorite. A team that was so close to winning the Super Bowl just 2 years ago against the Rams. Then last year, they were one field goal away and one overtime period away from being the AFC champs again and making the Super Bowl for a second year straight. They have the second best player and quarterback in the league in Joe Burrow, who leads the top 5 offense. They have an offense with the best wide receiver core in the league, with Jamar Chase looking to take another leap, with T. Higgins on a contract year. We know he's going to play harder this year. We know Tyler Boyd is a quality veteran that you can never underestimate. This offensive line has been their biggest question for years and years, but they addressed that this offseason as they signed Orlando Brown Jr. from the Chiefs, a very formidable offensive tackle. And again, you're bringing an offensive tackle from their biggest competitor from the Kansas City Chiefs to your ball club, which fills a big void. So it was really a double whammy there for the rest of the league. Their defense, it's led by Lou Anarumo, and he's heavily underrated. This defense is heavily underrated. Arguably, they have a top 5 group in the league. This team is bound to get a Super Bowl one of these years, and I believe it starts, this year. And again, that pains me to say as a Browns fan, but you cannot deny the talent of this Bengals club. And Joe Burrow, he puts more fear in anybody around the league. But finishing off here with the Detroit Lions as a pretender for the Super Bowl. They were the Cinderella team of last season. This team started off terribly. Dan Campbell came to the post-game presser one game and was saying, I know I'm going to get fired, but I'm going to have fun with this team before the end of the year. After that happened, they won 8 of their last 9 games, and they only missed the playoffs because of a tiebreaker to the Seattle Seahawks. This team almost made the playoffs after almost going perfect the second half of the year. But with Aaron Rodgers gone from the Packers and regression expected from the Minnesota Vikings, a lot of people believe this team can make some noise in their division this year and win their division, as they're only on the up and it seems like everybody else is on the downtrend. But Jared Goff, he's coming off of a career year. We have to wonder, can he repeat that production in year 2 under Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator. He played at a really good level last year. He became one of the most underrated guys in the league, but can he repeat that production? If he can, this team can be a sneaky contender, but if he can't, this team is quickly going to turn into a pretender in a lot of people's eyes. They had a lot of great offseason acquisitions as well, bringing in Jahmyr Gibbs, a versatile back there out of Alabama. They brought in Brian Branch, a safety out of Alabama, who I really like. And they also signed C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a guy who was slated to make $60-70 million this offseason. And he ended up signing for like a league minimum with the Detroit Lions. So they have an all-pro level corner that they brought in this offseason, as well as some great draft pieces. Even if this team does live up to the hype, let's say they win their division, they win 12 games, and they make the playoffs, right? They're making some noise. To me, I think that's as far as they're going to get. I don't see them winning a wild card game when it comes down to it. I think, sure, they can win their division, but I don't think they're going to beat the Minnesota Vikings in the playoffs. As crazy as that sounds, because Kirk isn't the clutchest player, we know that. But I just can't see them beating another NFC team in the playoffs unless there is an anomaly. No pun intended. But let's go over to the 5-5 recap. On the left side of your screen with the green numbers, of course, are the Super Bowl contenders. On the right side of your screen, it's going to be the pretenders. But on the left side, my top 5 Super Bowl contenders for this year are the Cincinnati Bengals, the Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs, Miami Dolphins. Might be a shocker there, but I really believe in Miami. And the San Francisco 49ers, and 1 through 5 in that order. And moving over to the pretenders, I think it's going to be the Detroit Lions, the New York Jets, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Baltimore Ravens, and the Cleveland Browns, of course. But do we really need to talk about the Browns? No, right? But that is the 5-5 recap. So we talked about the Hall of Fame game tonight. We kind of gave our prediction for the spread, the over-under. We talked about the Super Bowl contenders and pretenders. And now, we're only about 25 minutes into the show. Why not? Let's hop into like crossover grid, at least one of them, before we end today's show. All right, we're over here on the crossover grid. Something different here, but this is something that's been going around a lot on social media, and I said, why not? Let's give this a shot, all right? But basically, there's going to be 3 teams or scenarios on the left side, same on the top, and you want to match just this. You got to find one player in NFL history, basically, that did both. Here, you guys see the instructions on your screen, but let me show you what I'm talking about. For example, you see the Cardinals, Rams, and Packers on the left side. On the top, you see the Seahawks, the Panthers, and I'm assuming this is saying 4,000 passing yards in a single season since 1999. So you want to find a player that played for the Seahawks and the Cardinals, which weirdly enough, let me type this in, but I think Mike Iupati was a random guy that came to mind, but boom, right there. So you see only 18% of people thought of Mike Iupati, so I'm sure there's one more obvious than that, but for whatever reason, he was the first person to come to mind. So we're going to try and figure out this whole board here, and then that's going to do it for today's show. I mean, we can legitimately do this for an entire episode, but regardless, Mike Iupati. Moving over here, let's do the passing yards one, because I think that's going to be easy. I would assume it's not 4 passing yards, but 4,000, and if that is the case, of course, Aaron Rodgers for the Green Bay Packers. If I can actually type, here we go. Aaron Rodgers, a legend, maybe the greatest Green Bay Packer of all time. Moving over to the Rams in the 4,000 passing yards, we're going to go with Matthew Stafford. If it's not Matthew Stafford, and I'm going to go with Jared Goff. Weirdly enough, I think in that 1 year where they went to the Super Bowl, he did okay, and he had 23%. So it's only 23% of people thought of Jared Goff, which is interesting. I guess the majority of people thought of Matthew Stafford, as he has. He had a really good year. I thought he threw for 5,000 yards a couple years ago. Regardless, for the Cardinals and 4,000 passing yards since '99, I want to go with Kyler Murray really bad, and I'm almost positive he's done that a couple times in his career. But I'm going to go with a guy that led this team to the Super Bowl in 2011. I believe it was 2011. Regardless, Kurt Warner. Seems like 46% of people thought the same thing. So that is the quarterbacks. That was the easiest part of this. I see here for the Panthers and the Packers here at the bottom middle. We're going to go with Julius Peppers. If I can actually type on it. There we go. Julius Peppers is a legend here. He only came to mind because I am a Bears fan. secondary. I love the Browns first, then the Bears. And Julius Peppers was one of my favorite players growing up. And, I mean, he's just one of those defensive ends that was ahead of his time with how athletic he was and how gifted he was on that side of the ball. But 60% of people thought the same thing, of course, right? But moving over here to the Seahawks and the Packers. Weirdly enough, a guy like Eddie Lacy comes to mind. I'm thinking there's got to be a receiver that has played between these two teams. Jimmy Graham is a guy I think that's played for both of these teams. And matter of fact, I'm going to go with Jimmy Graham. Eddie Lacy was the guy that came to mind, right? I think I mentioned that. But Eddie Lacy was the guy that came to mind. But Jimmy Graham, I mean, he's played for 6 or 7 teams. And he was only in my mind because he just signed another contract with the New Orleans Saints. So he was on the top of my mind. Good thing I just saw that report the other day. But moving over to the Rams and the Seahawks, this one's a little bit more recent. We have a guy like Bobby Wagner. Where is he at here? Where is he at? That's Barry Wagner. We're not going to be doing that here. We're going to type in the full name here. But yeah, Bobby Wagner, he's a guy that is a Seahawks legend. He's going to get his number retired there most likely. He left them to find a different place to go. He ended up with the with the Los Angeles Rams, and now he's back as a Seattle Seahawk to finish things where it started. So that's always good to see. I always like when players kind of stay in one spot, especially if they are winning at a high rate. But moving over to the Rams and the Panthers and the Cardinals and the Panthers. So we got to think of some guys here. But matter of fact, I see Bobby Wagner in this jersey, and it kind of just gave me that answer. As a Browns fan, we talked about him earlier, but Baker Mayfield is a guy that maybe we didn't talk about him earlier. Regardless, I know we've talked about him a lot here on this channel because I am a Browns fan, but he just played he got traded to the Carolina Panthers after the Browns, and then it was traded to the Los Angeles Rams. Regardless, a lot of people are obviously getting that answer there. That's one of the more obvious ones. But moving over to the Cardinals and the Panthers, I believe we're still perfect. Guesses left. Yes, so we are still perfect. And I don't know. I think we have the Cardinals and the Panthers. Cardinals and Panthers. I'm thinking of a defensive player. I'm sure there's a cornerback that comes to mind here. I, for some reason, thought of Pat Pete, but Pat Pete's never played for the Panthers. I'm trying to think of those like mid-tier receivers that could have played for both teams. But you know what? A guy that came to mind, we talked about him in this defense earlier, but Hassan Reddick. This is a guy that led the league in sacks last year, if I'm not mistaken, or he was second behind not only, TJ Watt there, but Hassan Reddick, I can't spell his name right. Hassan Reddick, okay. We'll get this right eventually. There it is, Hassan Reddick. I spelled his name wrong, but boom, you guys see that we got all 9 right? 9 for 9. And let's see what the most... Okay, I see. So, oh, wow, I messed that one up big time. So the most common answers, I think, is what I'm getting at here. The most common answers we had, it looks like we had 5 of the most common answers there. Adrian Peterson's the guy that played for the Seahawks and the Cardinals, which is an interesting selection there for why that was the most popular. Chosen Anderson, formerly known as Robbie Anderson, played for the Cardinals and the Panthers, of course. And Carson Palmer, I kind of forget he was there in Arizona for a couple years, but he was there. And Arizona and Carson Palmer, that is the most common answer for 4,000 yards and the Arizona Cardinals in a single season. I went with Kurt Warner because I was thinking, hey, who's led them to a certain point where they've had to have a certain amount of success? And, Kurt Warner also had Anquan Bolden. He had Larry Fitzgerald at his disposal. So I rightfully so, I thought Kurt Warner could have, 4,000 yards in a season. But that's going to do it for today's episode. I mean, we ran through, again, the Hall of Fame game, some Super Bowl contenders and pretenders. And then we finished off here with something different here on the channel, some crossover grids. I might even make a full video out of this because I thought it was pretty fun. And, I mean, look, we finished today's crossover grid in about 5 minutes, right? But that's going to do it for today's episode. We'll see you guys tomorrow for some fantasy football content. As always, 4 days a week, 2 podcasts, 2 fantasy football episodes. We do it all here on the Anomaly Podcast. We haven't missed a day in about 10 months, right? We're approaching our 1-year anniversary of this channel. And we're approaching 500 subs on the channel, so help us get to that point if you enjoyed at any point, as it really helps and it really goes a long way. But without further ado, that's going to do it for today's show. We'll see you guys tomorrow. If I don't see you tomorrow, hopefully I'll see you next Tuesday for the next podcast. We're going to be running through maybe the top 25 players in the NBA. It's going to be tons of controversy. I'm sure not anybody in the world is going to agree with me 100%. But it is what it is. That's what debating is for. But again, if I don't see you guys tomorrow, we'll see you Tuesday, hopefully. If not, stay happy, stay healthy, have a great weekend. We'll see you guys next week.